Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Everyone, and welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. This is a very special episode of Geeky Gentlemen, so I'll start off by introducing everyone. I am Sid Partu, your dutiful host. Joining me as always is Justin Cristelli, aka The Real Manos, and we have three special guests this week. We have, from the Watchtower Database YouTube channel, James Strecker.
That's me. I'm very special. Thank you.
Yay. We have Maddie Washburn.
My mom called me special growing up, too. I think that's why she gave me the helmet.
And Ted Kendrick.
They called it enrichment at my school. So.
We lost so many listeners already.
Yeah, probably. Oh, man. So, yes, we are here today to do a first. This is like one of those things I've kind of wanted to do and tried to do. It's just scheduling and stuff is impossible. So these fine gentlemen are the creators behind the fan comic that Manos and I reviewed a couple months back on the show, called Legacies of the DC Animated Universe. There were 7 issues out at the time. We did a review of all 7 issues. There's 8 issues out now, correct?
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
Probably only one more than last time.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's a
Oh
Scarecrow.
crap! I have not read that. I gotta get to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh no.
Oh, it's really good.
It's short.
I'm not biased at all. But
All right.
It's the only one I've been mad at so far.
yeah.
Okay, great.
It's
All right,
got
everybody-
continuity
everybody
problems
stop
for
talking.
ya.
I'm gonna go read it right now, and I'll be right back.
It's called Scary
pause
Things.
for
It features
2
the
minutes.
Scarecrow.
Yeah. So anyway, just thought it'd be fun to get on and like I listened to some of the podcasts that you guys have done on your channel, and you guys mentioned me. I'm like, oh my god, I got mentioned twice? No way! So I kind of just threw out there like, hey, we should do a collab video, and they graciously agreed to jump on with this. So we just Manos and I just wanted to talk to you guys about the comic, and I figure I'll start off with like the first question. What made this seem like it was any kind of a good idea?
It was my idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I came to
technically.
it. So James was always going to start the Watchtower database as kind of a one-stop place to learn all about the DC Animated Universe. And over the years, he had been designing those, like, the character designs, like the 3/4 profile turn character images that you would have seen on the Batman, Superman website and all that stuff. James would create, like, not custom ones, but you would draw the characters that had never had their official model sheets released. Am I saying...
Yeah, it's like a
a
description.
I'm
I
going
guess,
through
yeah.
the story. This is kind of how it all started, at
Yeah.
least in my head. So you were...
Well, we were
Watch
part
Our
of like a
Database.
whole message board of people that would do
Yeah.
that. Kind of, it was
Called-
like a hodgepodge of like, someone would decide like, oh, there's no officially released model image for XYZ characters from the DCAU, and so they took it upon themselves to create those. And I was kind of, for a long time, I was just an aspiring one of those people. Like I would use.
It was
paint.
called DCU Animated. It was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
forum that lasted probably the early 2000s. I don't know when it closed down,
Yeah.
but
And
it changed names to SuperBuddies.net.
Yeah, Ted and I
after a
were
while.
like 12 years old when we were on there
Yeah, we were
originally.
young.
and I was trying my best to kind of come up to like the level of some of the artists on there using like paint and really like caveman versions of the tools that they had, but eventually got to be it sounds braggy, but I guess probably one of the more upperclassmen of the group.
You're okay.
Thank you. And it's probably because half of the really good people eventually left or realized, hey, I'm 40 years old. I shouldn't be on this message board anymore. But
let's fast forward a little bit.
You
made designs that were basically like the Justice League from the DC animated universe. It was like basically right in between JLU and Batman Beyond. It was kind of that like 2019 era, at least from our like timelining notes. It was like right before Bruce stopped being Batman, so you kind of did like, here's maybe what an older Hawkgirl would look like. Here's Jon Stewart. Here's Kyle Rayner. Now he's the Earth Green Lantern.
And that was completely just for fun to just do it.
Yeah. And so I saw those designs and figured we should make a webcomic about that. The funny thing is, we haven't got to that point in the webcomic where we could show that era. I will probably tease this later, but next year being 2019, and that being the year that Batman stops, or that Bruce stops being Batman in the Rebirth Part 1 Batman Beyond episode, we have a couple Legacies issues in the works to show events set in that year.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff we put out next year will be set in 2019, which will be a lot of fun.
Really
We'll talk about that later, but we can keep,
It's like the only time we can do that because
it's kind of
I
perfect.
hope that we're not still working on this comic by the 2040s, but it's possible.
It's amazing. By 2019, Gotham is still using those old, crappy 40s police cars.
That's so true.
The blimps are still around, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's how we got started on the comic. Just building this Watchtower database website, which is still in the works. Me thinking a great way to bring people back to the website would be to have a comic associated with it. And then from that, the YouTube channel spun out, which arguably kind of made us more of a name before this website's even finished.
Yeah.
Yeah. We found Maddie on Tumblr. Rest in peace, Tumblr.
Oh, topical humor.
I probably need to back up that whole blog before it all just goes to shit.
Yeah.
The next couple.
Might be a good idea.
Well, Maddie, I just watched one of your Vanishing Point episodes that came out recently, and you've done like a lot of the timelining of the DCAU and stuff, and so I'm assuming that's helped to kind of like plot and map out the Legacies comic.
Yeah, I give Maddie permission to tell the upsetting story he likes to tell about the timeline with Legacies. Go ahead, Maddie.
So when I first when I first started out mapping out the entire like DC animated universe, it was specifically for just the purpose of I wanted to know when to read the comics in terms of the shows and everything, and then I started realizing, the shows have these inconsistencies and the episodes need to be moved around, yada 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 yada. And so I had been trying to work on that for a couple of years, and so finally this other guy says, hey, let's work on it together. And then I saw Ted and James were working on this comic, and so I reached out to them because I was like, wait, if they're working on a comic set in between the two shows, then maybe they've got like a bunch of timeline information that I don't have saved right now, and they'd be able to help me out. And so I hit them up, and James so graciously sends me his timeline document, and it's 1 page long. and has just about nothing on it, and like a couple of the things that were on it, I was like, well, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this. But so they let me. They were like, okay, well, we'll tweak things per your suggestions and everything, but we can't really help you with your thing right now since we're working on our thing. But if you want to help with our thing, like we need this, that, and the other for the website. And so I was like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll help out with that. But I was going through like a really rough time in life at the time and wasn't able to really give a lot of time and energy to it. And so I backed up from it for a while, and eventually was able to be brought back, and James was like, hey, do you want to do the show? Do you want to like help with our continuity errors in the comic to make sure that everything smooths over, even though we're going to release an 8th issue that's full of continuity errors. But
I wouldn't say full.
I want to dig into that in a minute too.
I've read the 8th issue, the special with Scarecrow. Legitimately, it's one of my favorite Scarecrow stories now.
Nice. I'm flattered.
Oh, I definitely love it. My nitpickiness with it is we found like one panel in the Gotham Adventures run of comics where Jonathan Crane is still completely regular, which should be set after when they have this set. And for a while, James was insisting it was a different character, and then finally, after the issue's out, like we all go back and look, and it's just like, no, that was Crane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and then there was also the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Batman Adventures crossover that came out from IDW Comics last year, which kind of teases the Scarecrow. Like, so the Legacies issue about the Scarecrow is all about his transition from the Batman Adventures style to the new Batman Adventures, where he looks more like a zombie. He's got this sort of trench coat and the noose around his neck and all that stuff. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tie-in, there's a little bit that like leads to that transition as well. And I wanted to tie that in a little bit. James was like, no, we're not going to talk about that. That's not something we mentioned in the Legacies comic. But I like to plant like as many sort of references as possible.
Yeah, well, like our whole like philosophy, I guess, the whole time has kind of been, when we started planning Legacies, it was before before that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out, for sure.
It's before Batman and Harley Quinn.
Yeah, before Batman
that
Beyond 2.0 comics, before like any of that stuff was being released, like any new DCAU content whatsoever, pretty much. And so like we had all these story ideas and plot lines that were going to run through the whole comic that were hinged on specific stories that we were doing and stuff. And then they would come out with these new comics or stories or movies and kind of upheave that a little bit, and then we'd decide whether we change around what we want to do now that there's new actual canon, or if we just keep going with what we were doing and then kind of treat our Legacies as like a Elseworlds version of the continuation of the DCAU. We're still trying to like keep as close as possible to the original DCAU, like the 92 to 2006 range of stories. But then anything after that is kind of like fair game of whether or not we'll count it or not, I guess.
And I like to count as much as possible.
Yeah.
I try not to contradict anything on purpose. The Scarecrow story, Maddie, was pitched to me from James. This was his idea. He wanted to tell the story. I wrote the script. I wrote the script, but he came to me with the concept. So we blame James on that one.
Yes,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Speaking of writing, Manos definitely had a lot of questions about the process you guys go through for writing this. Manos, what do you got for him?
Yeah, when you you may have actually hit that a little bit earlier, but when you sit down for a particular issue, do you start with the outlines first?
I definitely
do. Do you outline the script first, and then do you go back and follow through with the script? If you don't mind explaining what the process is on that.
Oh, for sure. I've got an outline of the entire series. I already know how it's going to end.
Tell us. Reveal it now.
Reveal it
now.
No,
yeah.
It was all a dream. They were all in Tommy Westfall's snow globe the entire time.
At the end, Barbara Gordon wakes up on a hospital bed.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Damn, Tommy Westfall created everything. He's like the
I've
Franklin
got it
Richards.
like broken down from issue to issue, and we kind of have to readjust with every issue we put out, and we kind of look at this and we're like, well, do we have enough like bandwidth to actually tell the story? So there's been a lot of stuff that goes to the cutting board, but there's still the core story that we're trying to tell. So I usually write myself like a good couple paragraphs. It's kind of like the beginning to the end, and then when I sit down to write the issue, I break that down into what the page would be. So like I'll take my paragraph and kind of be like, okay, well, this will be page 1 of the comic, and then this will be page 2, and I just take the outline and space it out. It's almost like I'm zooming in the whole time. Start with the outline, zoom into like the page breakdown, and then from there I figure out my panels. And James is the type of artist who really prefers that I give him panels, and I'll even draw panel layouts. When I think of these pages, I have the page layout in my head, and so I will usually draw thumbnails to give to James, and he more or less sticks to those thumbnails because they're usually the right way to do it. But
Ted and I are both like movie minded, like we both work in that kind of industry, and so the comic panels kind of become more like movie storyboards almost. Like we read comics, like Ted has read way more comics than me, so he knows like, oh, break it down into this structure would be the best way to do it, and then from there I can kind of tweak it from like every once in a while if I'm like, oh, this would kind of be a cooler angle of the characters or whatever. And then there's also like Ted is kind of like the mastermind behind the overall story. Like we talked forever for like a couple years about like all the different things we wanted to do, and then Ted took that munge of just a giant document of ideas and like condensed it into, and that's happened several times too, where we'll recondense it. Like, wait, no, we've added 50 new random ideas. Oh, wait, Batman should say this one line at some point. Joker should do this one thing at some point. Where are we going to put that? And keep
James and Maddie
back.
both give me ideas for dialogue, for settings, like situations. Like they'll just come up with stuff, send it to me, be like, this would be really cool. And I always save those ideas and I just put it in this giant document that's probably almost 200 pages long. I don't know, it's really long. And I'll just like, or I'll kind of do Control F and I'll be like, okay, here's a cool Catwoman idea. Where's Catwoman in the structure? And then I'll find her and be like, oh, she's in this issue. Okay, I'll put this idea with this because this would be when I'd be able to use it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that's it. That's how we do it.
That's really cool. So you mentioned that you or Ted, you mentioned that you like do thumbnails of the panel layouts, and James just kind of goes with that and maybe changes slightly. That's really impressive to me because it's one of the things I was most impressed by with this comic was how well it all worked on paneling. I talked about that in our initial review of the Legacies comics we did, because I expect fans to be good at drawing. I expect fans to have clever ideas. What I don't necessarily expect is for them to understand the medium all the time because they don't have the experience in working in it. And so I was really impressed that the paneling was as strong as it ended up being.
Thank you. I should clarify, I don't draw the images in my thumbnails. They're literally just boxes, and I'll put a big number 1 for panel 1, number 2 is panel 2. Sometimes I'll draw a stick figure every now and then so James can know, like, oh, okay, that's how big this character is. But he does all the actual sort of artwork mindset
and
of it.
this last issue, the Scarecrow issue, we had drawn by Mark Martinez. He's done some coloring work for us in the past, and there's also been a couple issues by Marcelo Milikai. In case either of them are listening to this, so that they get proper credit.
They deserve it.
I do the majority of like the main 12-page issues, and you had mentioned something that made me think of something. Keep talking and I'll think of what it was.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Manos, you got any other questions about the writing process?
Oh, yeah. Actually,
Or the
this
creation
one's...
process?
This actually is a little bit maybe less technical of a question, but of course you guys go into the DCAU as fans creating this comic. I was wondering, because I was thinking about this on my own, like if I went into like either the DCAU or another fandom I like and creating, work. Is there anything about this particular version of the DC universe that you have grown to understand in ways that you maybe hadn't before?
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes this version so unique is that it's centered around Batman. He's the only character who's in every show of the DC animated universe, including Zeta Project and Static Shock. So it's kind of all centered around Batman. When Justice League did the epilogue episode, that is all about Batman. So I think he is kind of central to this version of the universe, whereas like the comics obviously can go anywhere. I personally, I mean, I've read DC for years, and I started reading in the 90s, so I have a personal love for that version of, or that time of the DC universe. And I think a lot of what I'm bringing to the Legacies comic and trying to pull the DCAU into that era of DC. Bringing things like, I'm trying to think like what I can say without being too much of a spoiler. Like maybe like you'll probably see Kyle Rayner featured pretty heavily next year. Characters like that. I mean, I love Grant Morrison's GLA
it's stuff
arc.
that works in the DCAU like tone and stuff because it came out around the same time that those shows were on, and it's stuff that kind of already mildly influenced the characters and episodes.
Yeah.
So
Tim Drake was Robin. Yeah. That's kind of a
for me. It's just both of us grew up with these shows also, and so it's just they're very special to us and. Versus other versions of the DC universe, like Cat by Cat.
He just jumped on it.
I think you asked about like if discovering new things about it. I think there's both a lot of stuff that's cool to find out is linked to each other. Like when they did all the Cadmus stuff in JLU, they brought to the forefront the idea that like, oh, this character that appeared in like one Batman episode and this character that appeared in one Superman episode, like they were actually part of the same government agency and all this stuff, and like they
like
purposely
Volcana.
did all that stuff. Yeah, but there's so much more of that I didn't realize was there until we teamed up with Maddie and started doing all this timeline stuff and like breaking down, there's only enough room for Two-Face to have 2 years of college. Like, who knew that now? And now we know that. And like, there's an interesting story there that we can potentially tell and stuff like that. So it both creates new ideas for the comic and sometimes puts us in a place of not knowing what to do with the comic because it's like a weird, not like continuity error or anything, but just kind of like, oh, they didn't communicate well enough. There's a way to make it work. Let's tell that story so that everything's tied up in a nice little bow.
I remember in one of the commentaries for Justice League when I first started buying like the DVDs, I just eat all that stuff up and was like listening to all the commentaries because I love listening to how creators think. When they write and put things together, and the Justice League ones, the Bruce Timm ones, you could count on that kind of discussions. And I remember, I think it was around the time, it was the Justice League box set where they were doing like the Cadmus stuff. I remember Bruce Timm talking about how a lot of the stuff they had done over the years really wasn't meant to be connected. And then when they were like building the Cadmus season, they were realizing. Like the question, looking at the board and like, this all accidentally connects, which is really interesting because like they mentioned like when Brainiac once shot Luthor and it should have killed him, but it didn't, and they brought up the fact that that was a dart, to like insert his personality in him secretly. And I love that kind of stuff. And I love that kind of way art can kind of accidentally create
take on
itself.
A life of its own.
Life of its own.
Yeah,
and,
there's stuff they do that well, and then you compare it to something like Spider-Man 3 with actually Sandman killed your uncle. Just kidding.
Yeah. There are bad ways to go about it. Yes.
No doubt.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're coming from it from like a different angle where it's like all this has been kind of sort of pieced together. And now you're piecing. Now you're kind of taking. It is it even though this is a fan work, I do see you guys in a way taking the baton and kind of like doing like I don't know season 5 or season 6 if you want to call it that. For what you're doing with the fan comic and the Legacy series. And
that is such a great compliment.
Yeah.
You also,
and I
listened to your review and you gave me one of the best compliments ever. It was better than Future's End. And I want to make that the series like tagline now.
Little quote, yeah.
Yeah. You do like the reviewers say, and it's just like one
USA
quote from
Today.
Thanos.
We should
totally. You can totally use it for that. But I actually enjoyed Legacies kind of better than I did a lot of the official Justice League AU comics. Maybe because this one feels. Maybe it's because you have the advantage of the Justice League series being over, and you can kind of have a little bit more room to maneuver.
For now.
Yeah.
So scared they're going to put out another, direct-to-DVD release.
Something that I've actually brought up in conversation with Ted and James, like regarding the Justice League animated tie-in stuff, is that a lot of that seems like they were dealing with so many characters that weren't developed yet, and so they didn't know where to go and everything, and so it all ended up getting run over like with a steamroller by the show just being like, we'll throw it out. And whereas with like the Batman or the Superman adventures, they're dealing with just like the one or two characters, and it's not as likely that something gets chunked out the way. And so I feel like with Legacies, we've really got the upper hand of knowing where everything went already, and being able to kind of piece things together that way, which like will definitely be steamrolled as soon as they get that Justice League reunion movie everyone's clamoring for. But
we have a contingency plan.
Hopefully they consult us on that.
Oh yeah, that's what's gonna happen. Sure. Well, like that leads me to a question that will kind of transition us as well. But I want to talk about this, like specifically as a fan work, because like we've definitely talked about it in ways related to that, but that's more just incidental. I want to talk about like specifically the way it exists as a fan work, because in our review I mentioned that the timing of release was very
bad,
scattered. Yeah.
That won't change.
We do
anytime
this thing
soon.
called be tactful on Geeky Gentlemen. We try to be tactful. That's why we just insert our SJW.
Oh well, you have
politics
me
left
on
and right.
here, so it's
that's where the gentleman part comes in.
right.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like the timing of release has been really awkward, and then you've got like and this is where my voice gets lost. Then you've got stuff like the Batman or Harley Quinn and other projects coming out that are suddenly in continuity, and it's not just like that movie blows up your whole thing. It's just it adds things that now you have to like consider. Do we want to fucking deal with that? Like,
and I do.
You have a running joke. You have a running joke in your shows whenever that gets mentioned. Oh, Starfire's in this universe now. Thanks for that. And I really like that. So like. What particular challenges, there's my voice again, what particular challenges do you have with this just because it's a fan work?
Not being able to consult any official, like, story guides or biographies or like anything that hasn't been publicly released. Like, we just have to guess. Like, there's plenty of characters that, like, for instance, okay, the Batman the Animated Series, there was like a character Bible that had like full backstories of like the Penguin's relationship with his mother and how he dealt with people making fun of him as a child and all this stuff that's not included in the like brief paragraph of information you get for him anywhere else. We don't have access to, a Bible for any of the other shows or even anything beyond that. And for me, that's the hardest part, is just trying to, put myself in the mind of Paul Dini or Bruce Timm or Dwayne McDuffie or whatever, or at least, do my best guess or Ted's best guess or anybody's best guess, and just be like, what would they have done with this character? Where do you think they would have put them, and what is a situation to put them in that's not going to be disrespectful to what they did for 20 years? So yeah, there's my answer.
And not just them. I mean, these characters some of them are 70 years old, 80 years old, and it's like so many people have worked on it, which is why I think this universe might be a little more forgiving as a fan project. We're just another group of people who are working on Batman,
right.
Like us and so many others, even though we're doing it on an official capacity.
Yeah.
So, but still.
Okay. All right. Well, then that's kind of transitions into the part that I'm always so good at, which is making everything about myself.
Yay!
Yeah, I'm really curious what your guys' thoughts of the review were.
Ted wrote down a bunch of notes.
I took notes.
So, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
How much better was I in that interview?
Your
voice
both were
is
great.
so creamy and delicious, I must say.
Thank you. I like to think of it as caramello.
Nice. You I mean, you both had like incredibly it kind of blew me away to actually hear it for the first time. I was really flattered that you took the time to talk about this for half an hour. I was blown away. And I think you are all like had very valid criticism and totally on point. I have just a bullet list of notes. If you want me to just rattle it off, I'll just say them real quick. Peacemaker, Peacemaker, and new characters like Phantom Stranger. Those have been so fun to add. Peacemaker, we kind of went in treating him like the comedian from Watchmen. We even like joked, oh, like the comedian, he didn't leave the stage, he's still out there. Because we kill him off in the assault on Apocalypse. Phantom Stranger was kind of the perfect narrator to do the number 0 issue, because he's such a familiar DC character, but he'd never been. Well, he was in the DCAU tie-in comics. He was an issue of Gotham Adventures and Justice League Adventures, but he was never fully in the cartoons or anything. So he was a lot of fun to bring in. And there's a few more characters that we want to bring in the future. Coming up soon, I'm trying to think what I can say without spoiling anything too major. What do you think, James?
Well, I was going to say...
New characters for bringing.
Let's see. We brought in like Checkmate, the Agent Chase.
That's right.
People, Director Bones.
The hierarchy of Checkmate was really fun
Yeah.
to create, and we're going to get into that more. You'll kind of learn who the king and queens are, their bishops or knights, and I think you'll see some really interesting inclusions there. Some that were in Checkmate in the comics, and some that might be new.
With the Phantom Stranger, there was I wrote like a fan fiction Justice League episode when I was like 14 or something that was started off with like Amazo narrating like from outer space about it was almost the same way that we started the comic, where it was like him kind of just like talking about the birth of the universe and superheroes' importance and stuff, and then it just immediately went into like Batman and Black Canary doing something in Gotham City. I don't remember, but I like that idea to have like an I think I chose Amazo for that stupid little story because it was like in Justice League Unlimited, he says when they're fighting Solomon Grundy, he's like, oh, I gotta go to space to figure out a way to stop him, I'll be right back, and he poofs away and he never comes back for the rest of the series.
Right.
So we were talking about like, oh, we gotta like maybe he's a good voice to have as like an overarching narration that will bring him. We don't know who's talking for several issues, and then we eventually bring him in, but that kind of morphed into the Phantom Stranger. And I actually didn't realize at the time that we were drawing that the first couple issues that the Phantom Stranger had appeared in Gotham Adventures and the Justice League Unlimited comic, and I didn't reference that at all for like how he should look.
Really close though.
Yeah, it was almost like an identical character design, and I think that kind of speaks to like how like iconic he looks. Like he has a very distinct visual style to him. That's all I wanted
also
to
the
add.
simplicity of Bruce Timm's art style. It's kind of easy as long as you kind of stick to that clean line work and stuff. You can draw anyone in that style.
That's the same thing Chris Jones was telling us whenever we talked to him. Was he had created a Booster Gold story for the Justice League Adventures comic, and they axed it because they heard he was coming into the show, and they didn't want to interfere with that or anything. But then after he was in the show, Chris was like, well, that's almost the same exact guy I drew. Like there's almost no difference. Why didn't you let me do the story?
And then they published the issue. It was one of the last couple of issues in the Justice League Unlimited run, so they did get it out there eventually. Other things, you guys called us out on the long overarching long form storytelling style as opposed to one and done structures. And I guess you've seen with the Scarecrow issue, we are doing some one and done issues, but that's kind of why they're specials. And then we have our ongoing numbered issues like 1, 2, 3, 4 that are going to be telling our long form story. Although in the future, we're going to stop doing 3-parters and I think condense them down to 2. So there'll be less of a wait to get the full story. Every now and then we'll put out a bit of a longer one, but I think we'll save that for like the near apocalypse of 09 and major events like that we'll get to.
Yeah, and we started off doing the comic, of course, somehow thinking that we were going to be able to put out like an issue a month, and then it became an issue every other month, and then it became, oh my God, how are we supposed to do this? And we brought on a couple other artists that I had mentioned before, but even with other people helping all the time, and Maddie helping with the timeline, and all this stuff going on, it's still this is the only project that we're doing for these where we don't make any money off of it. We have to. It takes like way more time than any of the other things, and it like even for me, like it takes a lot of motivation for me to sit down and draw even like half a page of that stuff, because I'm so critical of my own, like, is this how Bruce Timm would draw the right index finger knuckle on this man's hand? I don't think so. I got to start over, and like I'll just do that constantly, and so it takes a while to get the issues out because of that, and we keep saying, oh, it'll get better, and then it just kind of stays the same. But I think that it's kind of like we've gotten to the point where even when we just released this 6-page Scarecrow issue, there were way more people that got to see it and appreciate it than the last issue we put out, because in that several month time period we gained like twice the amount of subscribers on the YouTube channel. So
which is another reason why you haven't been able to draw as much, because you've been busy editing videos for the YouTube channel. Exactly. Which is great. And it's like you said, it's grown our audience, and it's that actually has been bringing in a little bit of money, which has helped us make
good.
Legacies.
I'm glad you guys are able to make some money on the side from this, because that is, like, the thing is, Manos and I mainly review fan films, right? And that's because fan films are pretty easy to create at the end of the day. If you got some friends and a camera in your backyard, you can make a lot of things work.
And we've seen several of those.
Yes. Fan comics, however, comics are such a labor of love, so to do them at a level of quality that Manos and I feel comfortable talking about, where we're not just either putting on kids' gloves or just tearing something apart, is really, really difficult to find stuff of that quality. So I really appreciate that you guys are doing it, and I'm glad I didn't hurt your souls or anything.
No,
only a little bit.
The time. Only a little bit. Just some mild trauma.
Because
I
gotta
you're
say,
right on
like,
point.
I was really, when I first started reading the first couple, I really started to get into it, and really, I got really excited and a little emotional when I was reading them, because and I'm sure you know that I do my own comic, and I work very hard on that. And you guys are putting a lot of love and effort into this series that, this is just essentially a fan comic. You will not be able to really make anything off this, but you're doing it out of the love and you're doing it because you feel like you have to. And boy, that kind of got me right there when I thought about it.
Yeah, I think I could safely say we all love this universe, and we just wanted to see it continue. So it's our pleasure to make it. Thanks for making it.
I can tell. I can definitely tell every page.
The first issue with Batman Beyond and all that was probably the third draft, I'd say, of our first issue. Like, it was an entirely different story. Like, each of the 3 times we kept debating, like, how are we going to launch this thing? And we finally settled on that, and that was one of my favorite things I've probably ever written, with Kronos and all that. That was so much fun.
Nice. No, guys, like, it's so much fun doing these fan project reviews on Geeky Gentlemen, because from what I can tell, there'll be like a fan film maybe once a year that gets a lot of attention, and a bunch of different YouTube channels will talk about it because it's the flavor of the month or whatever. But there's not consistent content out there just talking about different fan projects of varying levels of popularity. So when I can find something just of this high of quality with this much devotion behind it, it's really, really exciting to be able to talk about. And I'm glad you guys responded so well to it. We've had some reactions from fan filmmakers and stuff that have been less than positive. So it's
why
great
don't you
to be able to
try
have
making
this kind of
a movie? What do you even know? That kind of thing.
Oh, even worse than that, honestly. Like, it gets pretty bad when the move is to criticize my ability to criticize.
Well, we all come from a filmmaking background too. Like, I know James is working on a movie. Maddie is a writer and working on projects all the time, and I'm a producer and do short films and stuff every now and then too. So we, I guess, I don't know, we've been there. I haven't made any superhero fan films, but yeah. Oh, you have to be able to take criticism, and it's such a collaborative medium too. You got to work well with others.
Well, I think that will do it for the interview portion. Now, I see, if I were good at this whole YouTube thing, I would have thought to say this at the beginning of the video, but like, hey, this is part of a crossover. Manos and I are going to be on these guys' channel.
Reviewing. All you gotta do is just clip that audio and then just put it at the front, and then
Exactly.
This is part of a
this
whole
is more
conversation.
funny.
Yeah.
just have
This
it.
is more funny.
Well, put it at the front and leave it here.
Just do both.
Just have the people questioning. Wait, why did he say he should have said this at the start of the video?
This is the start of the video.
Yes,
I like
we'll be doing a
Yeah.
video over on their channel reviewing a fan comic that inspired. Was it all three of you, or was it just like one of you that found this thing and then kind of like shared it after the fact?
I read it when it was coming
Ted
out.
and I have known about it since it came out. Yeah.
I saw it years ago and read like an issue or two, but never really revisited it until like just now. And then like I tried to like read the first 5 issues before getting on the call, but.
Nice.
Are you familiar at all with the World's Finest Online and the DC animated forums that were part of
No.
Toon Zone? So
Not at all.
ToonZone.net had a like specific DC animated forum where people like Bruce Timm and Dwayne McDuffie would jump in the forum and comment with people. They would do like, it was active when the Justice League episodes would come out, so they would do talkback discussions, and every now and then Bruce Timm would jump in and reply, which was really cool to see. So this website hosted the Dark Knight Adventures, and when it came out, it would also do talkback forums for these issues. And so I remember following the Justice League episodes, and this comic came out while Justice League was in production. So every now and then it would have the same problem Legacies has, where an official episode or something would contradict what they were doing in the webcomic.
That's
So,
too funny.
Yeah.
boy.
All right, so if you guys want to hear us talk about that, go over to the Watchtower Database channel, and that video will hopefully be up around the same time that this one goes up. We'll discuss scheduling after the fact.
Sounds good.
But everyone, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the realist.
And
We're
I'm
the Watchtower
James.
Database.
I'm special.
And we are your
That's the sound we make when
geeky
we
gentlemen,
transition.
and we will be discussing things.